In April 1984, Robert Gallo told America that he had found the probable cause of AIDS in a virus later called the human immunodeficiency virus. Since that time, those who have dissented from orthodoxy have been trying to understand how within 2 years the general consensual acceptance of Gallo's hypothesis, which came to be that HIV was the sole cause of a number of AIDS-defining illnesses, was transformed into a universal scientific tenet. Gallo's idea, which has never been scientifically proven, even survived the opinion of Luc Montagnier, one of France's most eminent virologists who is now credited with having discovered HIV in 1983, and who in 1991 stated that HIV alone was insufficient to cause AIDS. Few commentators, however, have focused on the crucial role which the production and marketing of AZT, the first drug license is antiretroviral, played in reinforcing Gallo's idea. AZT has proved a remarkably persistent poison in the pantheon of orthodox medicine between 1987 and 1992, crucial years in the development of research into the causes of what many have accepted as AIDS. AZT was the sole drug licensed for the treatment of HIV in people who had an AIDS diagnosis. In 1993, the delayed publication of the Concord trials results showed conclusively that asymptomatic antibody-positive individuals who took AZT died quicker and in greater number than those simply affected by AIDS-defining illnesses. Following these results, the drug went out of fashion as a monotherapy. Wellcome and its scientists and public relations staff, however, worked hard to rehabilitate the drug and in large part succeeded in bearing the implications of the Concord trial results. In the process of producing and marketing AZT, the Wellcome Foundation set in chain a powerfully persuasive machine which created information, culture, and social relations with one purpose: to sell the drug. This network had a life force which would have continued to drive it forward, even if it had occurred that the drug quickly killed everyone who took it. The production and marketing of AZT can best be viewed within the context of the global pharmaceutical industry in general and the Wellcome Foundation in particular. The world pharmaceutical industry is worth $130 billion. Over the last 10 years, the industry has been characterized by high growth and high profits. This integration into larger global corporations has occurred also because many pharmaceutical companies have been extending their reach into different levels of healthcare, into hospital management, corporate employee health schemes, and cradle-to-grave healthcare planning. The Rockefeller Foundation, America's largest trust, which pioneered scientific medicine at the turn of the century, often had British representatives on its board, as did the Carnegie Foundation. The Rockefeller Foundation and the Rockefeller Institute financed British hospitals, British universities, and British scientific and social research. The Rockefeller Institute worked with the Wellcome Foundation, and later the Wellcome Trust had gone on since the early days of British and American presence in Africa, China, and Southeast Asia. Following the Second World War, the Wellcome Trust, which was almost bankrupt, relied upon American financial support to get back on its feet. By the end of the 1950s, Rockefeller interests and those of Wellcome covered many overlapping areas. The power and influence of the Rockefeller Foundation in the years between the World Wars and up until the late 1960s was considerable. Not only did the empire influence and manipulate many of America's biggest corporations, but it also had influence within the CIA, the FBI, and all the most powerful institutions of the U.S. government, from the State Department to the National Institute of Health. The Rockefeller Empire set up numerous organizations in America, Europe, and Britain to engineer the social and political directions of these countries. They also set up international organizations which would work towards balancing the world foreign policy and political economy. The first of these, the American Roundtable, published the Foreign Affairs Journal and was related to the British Institute of International Affairs. This transatlantic policy organization was added to in the 50s with the Bilderberg Group, and in 1974 the Trilateral Commission. The senior executives of multinational corporations that attended Bilderberg and Trilateral Commission meetings could rub shoulders with officials from the State Department, British ministers of defense, Japanese government officials, and heads of the most powerful financial institutions in the world. 3 out of the last 4 presidents of the United States have been Rhodes Scholars and Trilateral members. The reality of the influence held and exercised by the Trilateral Commission has been obscured by smokescreens thrown across their activities by participants. Despite this, a number of generalizations can be made. First, the Trilateral Commission has discussed every important world economic and political crisis, whether concerning oil or population growth, usually years before they occurred. Second, this group provided the world's most powerful people with a ready-made network of world political strategy and industrial influence. The Trilateral Commission was throughout the 1970s and 80s the policy think tank of the developed world. Throughout the 1980s, the Wellcome Foundation and its Wellcome Trust both participated in the Trilateral Commission. AZT was not designed as a drug to combat HIV. It was developed from a herring and salmon sperm extract by Jerome Horowitz in 1964 for the National Cancer Institute. As cancer chemotherapy, it was designated to destroy dividing cells which were producing tumors. AZT, however, is indiscriminately cytotoxic. It kills any dividing cells by interfering with the reproduction of DNA. After development of AZT was dropped, it became an orphan drug, one with no pharmaceutical company parent to rear it, and it languished on the shelves of the National Institute of Health. The decision to test AZT in 1985 for antiviral properties was not due to farsightedness or any sixth sense. In 1985 and 1986, inside the NIH research establishments, everything which came to hand was being tested for antiviral qualities. Excuse me. AZT was sent to Burroughs Wellcome, where Dave Berry, head of research, suggested that AZT should be sent to an investigator to be tested for antiretroviral qualities. The commissioned report was positive. Wellcome then put the drug in the hands of Sam Broder, head of the National Cancer Institute, part of the National Institutes of Health. Since 1984, Broder had been clinical director of the NCI Special Task Force on AIDS. Burroughs Wellcome had 2 good reasons for giving the drug to Sam Broder. First, Robert Gallo worked at the NCI, and secondly, Wellcome knew that Broder would see the drug through the regulatory hoops, with Wellcome apparently playing a backseat role. The drug became the official cure for AIDS, promoted by the U.S. government, to help Broder work AZT through the regulatory process and to secure their ownership of the drug. Burroughs Wellcome gave the NCI $55,000 in 1985 and $25,000 in 1986. Research and development, including trials for new drugs, can take up to 12 years. With the help of the NIH, Wellcome managed to carry out this work for AZT in 18 months. In 1986, a 12-center trial study began to test AZT for effectivity in AIDS cases. This was the first time that the drug had been used on human beings. These Phase 2 trials were terminated prematurely, after a period of only 9 months, when it was found that while only one of the AZT-taking group had died there, when it was found that while only one of the AZT-taking group had died, there were 19 deaths in the placebo group. Many theories have been put forward since as to why this might have happened. The trial was so badly organized that no follow-up information was recorded on any of the trial subjects, making it impossible to see what might have happened in the longer term. However, in 1992, John Lauritsen, an American researcher and writer, obtained documents under the Freedom of Information Act from the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. These documents, although heavily censored, revealed that the trials had become unblinded, with trial subjects crossing between groups, that serious adverse reactions to the drug had gone unreported, including 19 cases of anemia requiring life-saving transfusions, and that trial records had been altered to reflect better results for the drug. The trial was so chaotic at its Boston center that in January 1987, the FDA was forced to hold a special meeting to decide whether or not to allow the data from this and 2 other centers, which it did. Almost 4 years of licensed use, it was accepted that AZT had a 1,000 times higher toxicity than had been quoted by Burroughs Wellcome in the datasheet compendium or cited in the Physician's Desk reference in 1986, at an end cost of £10,000, or almost up to $20,000 in US dollars per patient per year. Wellcome attempted to keep the dosage as high as possible. By 1993, however, dosages had been reduced by most doctors from 1,200 milligrams to 500 milligrams. In 1990, Wellcome managed to open an expanding market when they got the FDA to license the use of AZT for healthy individuals who tested positive for HIV antibodies. It was only a short step from this decision to the free dispensing of AZT as a prophylactic, for example, for doctors or nurses who had received needle stick injuries. In May 1987, the drug was licensed by the British Regulatory Authority. America followed Britain in licensing, and by the middle of 1987, AZT was licensed for use in 15 different countries. By November 1987, within a year of the only trial being aborted, AZT was licensed in 35 countries. Between 1983 and 1987, during the first flushes of the development and licensing of AZT, Wellcome's turnover almost doubled from £674 million to £1,132 million. To give the marketing bandwagon maximum publicity, Wellcome organized the biggest worldwide media campaign that had ever been carried out by a drug company. The idea was that if Wellcome could sell to governments in bulk, the fine-tuning of AZT marketing could be left to in-place networks of doctors and scientists in those countries. Licensing hearings in European countries were preceded and followed by symposia geared to extracting maximum press coverage. In September 1987, a symposium was held in Paris to launch AZT. 180 doctors and journalists attended an all-expenses-paid meeting at the Hotel Sofitel at Sèvres. Similar symposia followed licensing in other European countries. In the autumn of 1987, there were symposia in Naples, organized to cover the African continent, and in Ecuador, giving television coverage to the Caribbean, and Latin America. Wellcome chose the Naples Conference, AIDS and Associated Cancers in Africa, to launch the new generation of AIDS testing kits. Both these conferences were organized in conjunction with Wellcome by Abbott Laboratories, one of the leading drug companies in the Rockefeller portfolio. Wherever the AZT caravan stopped, it presented physicians from important metropolitan centers like London and New York. These market pitches were paid for in every last detail by Wellcome, Burroughs Wellcome, or one of the other drug companies which made up the Wellcome cartel group. By March 1980, Wellcome had patent applications pending in 40 countries. Within 2 years of its aborted licensing trials, with the scientific establishment no nearer to proving any actual link between HIV and AIDS, with no relevant data available about serious adverse reactions, long-term effects, or comparisons with non-drug treated subjects, Dr. Jonathan Mann who had been director of the World Health Organization Global Program on AIDS, could say that the only drug to prove effective against AIDS so far was Wellcome's AZT. One possible reason why, despite trials being held in America, AZT was first licensed in Britain might have been that Wellcome had greater control over the Medicines Control Agency than they did over the FDA. In Britain, all matters to do with the licensing and marketing of medicines are regulated by the Medicines Control Agency. This agency, which became an independent self-financing organization under the Next Step program in 1989, had previously been a part of the Department of Health. The most important committee which comes under the guidance of the MCA is the Medicines Commission. This committee advises the Minister for Health on matters relating to medicines. Another, the Committee on the Safety of Medicines, grants product licenses. From 1985 to the end of 1989, one of the most prominent members of the Medicines Commission advising the Ministers for Health on AIDS treatments was Professor Trevor Jones, presently head of the Association of British Pharmaceutical Industries, the Director of Research and Development at the Wellcome Foundation. Especially in relation to AZT, Jones was perhaps the most important executive officer in the whole of the Wellcome complex. Besides Professor Jones, out of a local committee of 25, no less than 5 other members of the 1989 Medicines Commission had interests in or connections with Wellcome. AZT was fast-tracked through the British licensing system after a period of only 8 months of research and development. The technical deliberations which took place within the Committee on the Safety of Medicines are secret, so we are unlikely to find out how the decision to license AZT was taken. We can, however, say that no other purportedly antiviral drug which followed AZT was given that same fast-track opportunity. In August 1984, Wellcome was approached by Dr. Robin Weiss, the executive director of the Institute of Cancer Research, a postgraduate institute, part of London University and counterpart to the American NCI, where Gallo held the patent rights on testing kits. In the past, the institute had received the majority of its funding from the Medical Research Council, but this had been gradually overtaken by funding from industry. Dr. Wise offered Wellcome his ideas about diagnostic testing kits, and then went into business with Wellcome producing the kits. In 1985, it was estimated that the British market for diagnostic kits was worth £3 million and £4 million worldwide. Worldwide, the market was assessed at a value of £180 million. Welcozyme HIV monoclonal, the second-generation AIDS testing kit, was launched by Wellcome in autumn 1987 at a Naples symposium. Medical equipment does not have to have the same rigorous regulatory proving as pharmaceuticals. There are no clinical trials and no peer review. Wellcome's production of HIV antibody testing kits was a marketing scandal of immense proportion, for Wellcome knew that ultimately they would be able to sell AZT to almost every individual that they had diagnosed as HIV antibody positive. Wellcome had a monopoly franchise on HIV testing kits, which were produced by their subsidiary company, Wellcome Diagnostics. The traditional form of evaluating research has been peer review, followed by publication in a few established and meritorious journals. This system of gatekeeping clearly had its drawbacks because it meant that orthodoxy retained control not only over standards of research, but inevitably over content. The peer review system attempted to act as a centralized clearinghouse for research while keeping a continuous, if nominal, check on standards. Today, there are no universal standards for the evaluation of non-licensed application drug trials. Commercial and industrial interests have helped launch a large number of vested interest journals which print the research work which they have funded. Drug trials are overseen primarily by research staff working for the producer company, and even the investigators are often supported by the company or work in units which rely for future funding from the company concerned. For the first 5 years of AZT's life, Wellcome controlled almost all the known AIDS cases in Europe and in America by drawing them into trials. In November 1987, 8 months after licensing in the U.S., Dr. Trevor Jones declared in a press release that they soon anticipated clinical studies to involve 6,000 patients, aside from 5,000 patients who were already using the treatment. Nussbaum reported that in 1988, practically 80% of the patient slots in the NIAID's AIDS clinical group were for AZT trials. By 1992, Dr. Jones was able to tell the press that 4,000 separate studies had now been carried out which demonstrated the benefits of AZT. In October 1988, just as Wellcome and the Medical Research Council were beginning the Concord trials, the APGOA received sudden and quite substantial funding. This funding came in part from the Wellcome Foundation, which in 1988 gave around £10,000. And the Concord trial protocols, Wellcome managed to negotiate a clause of just this kind, and consequently Wellcome were able to suspend the trial results while they organized damage limitation. During the waiting time, a number of Wellcome directors cashed in their own shares of the company. When the results were finally published, they were written in Scientese, which obscured their understanding. And I quote from the official published document of the Concord trials. The key question in Concord was whether AZT early in asymptomatic HIV infection delayed the onset of AIDS and prolonged life. It was an eventful trial, and crucial to its success was the involvement of the HIV community groups in the United Kingdom. When a similar trial was stopped early because of a not unexpected short-term benefit, Concord continued, but not without some difficult decisions. The final results were important but disappointing to participants. HIV-infected individuals, doctors, the trial team, and the Wellcome Foundation, as there was no evidence of benefit from the early use of AZT in terms of survival or disease progression over a longer period of follow-up. A systematic overview based on individual patient data of all the trials of AZT conducted by the HIV Trialists Collaborative Group and coordinated by the MRC-CTU confirmed the results of Concord showing no benefit from early AZT in terms of survival or disease progression. However, there was clear evidence of a short-term delay in the development of AIDS in the first year, consistent with the first short-term trial. The loss of benefit over time was explained by the emergence of viral resistance to AZT, not surprisingly to those familiar with the story of tuberculosis treatment. Subsequently, two other NRTIs, diadenosine and zalzibetine, became available, although it rapidly became clear that both were associated with the development of peripheral neuropathy, and DDL was associated with pancreatitis. The second MRC trial, Alpha, extended the collaboration with the French to include several other European countries and Australia, and demonstrated that lower doses of DDL were no less effective than higher doses, but were associated with less toxicity. In America, it is the National Institute of Health that controls all the research around HIV and AIDS, ensuring that scientists keep to the beaten track. Research into HIV is allowed, but not into AIDS. Research is allowed into antiviral pharmaceuticals, but not into natural health care for immune system disorders. In Britain, AIDS research funding and its direction is controlled by the Medical Research Group, and the Medical Research Group was originally set up with a number of other research councils so that government money could be equitably allocated to government prioritized medical research projects. This is why you haven't heard this information before.